If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? Happy Friday. Welcome to the Ron and Don Show. And, of course, everybody knows on Friday, we've already talked sports this week, news, talk, all the stuff we used to do at Cairo. We do that on the Monday, the Wednesday, the Thursday show. But on Friday, we talk real estate. And today, we have a very special guest. His name is Matthew Gardner.
Yes.
And why is Matthew stopping by today? How do we know
that? I've had some feedback online. It's like, Ron, it's hard to believe you because you are not an economist, even though you play one on the radio. So here's the thing. For over the years on Cairo, I basically pretended to be an expert in every field. That was my job.
And you're great at it.
And so Middle East conflict happens, bam, I'm an expert in the Middle East.
You're an expert, yeah.
Sports, I'm an expert in sports. So
yes.
I pretended to be an expert in a lot of things.
Can you just stop using past tense?
Yeah, exactly. I'm still pretending to be a lot of things. And so I thought it would be valuable for us as we look into 2026 and beyond, specifically for the real estate market, to get someone with actually bona fide credentials.
An actual economist.
An actual economist. So I have an actual economist coming in named Matthew Gardner. He's going to help explain the locked-in effect, which I think has impacted this market in a really big way for the past 4 or 5 years. And so we're going to see what that means for us here. And basically, we're going to talk the economy through the lens of real estate with an actual economist.
And we're lucky to have him because people respect him all over the country. Real estate agents, financing people, they love to hear from him. So everybody in the Ron and Don Nation, it's a special treat. I'll get out of here and make room for Matthew Gardner, an incredible real estate economist, coming up right here on the Ron and Don.
All right, so here we are with economist Matthew Gardner. We're going to talk a little real estate in Seattle. But Matthew, I was just curious for my own curiosity, how does one become an economist in real estate specifically?
Oh, wow. There aren't that many of us. Interesting story, though. So you probably gather, not from around here.
Right.
Born and raised in Yakima.
Right.
No, so I'm British. The first real job I had after I got all my degrees, what have you, was working for a company in London. And they're a firm of chartered surveyors. And what they do is they manage estates or manage portfolios. Mm-hmm. And one of them was the Church of England, obviously a lot of land in the UK.
Right.
The other one was the Crown, the royal family.
Really?
And so in working with them on that, it brought me across to the eastern part of your country, because you didn't get it all back in 1776.
Okay.
We kind of kept rather large.
This is interesting.
And so I was here, mainly obviously on the eastern seaboard. My sister at the time was working for Microsoft. I came to Seattle and said, okay, well, who analyzes real estate? And quite frankly, back then, builders licked their thumb and was like, I'll build this.
Yeah.
And no one really had any kind of analytic side. Commercial world, yeah. Residential, not. And so I said, this could be interesting. So I basically kind of went around to all the major brokerages and said, well, what if you could tell your clients, one, if they should build something, two, how quickly it will sell for, what prices, and basically get the crystal ball out. And that's how I started working for a company. And then I didn't quite get on well with that. So I kind of went out on my own for 15 years. I then went back into the corporate world for about 9, back out on my own again.
And here we are.
Yeah. So
you happen to just pick one of the most robust real estate markets in all of the world, really, in Seattle.
Yeah, we certainly. I mean, a lot of things were going on back in the late 90s, obviously 2000. Not a good time to set a company up, by the way, here in Seattle with the dot-com crash.
Right.
But it has been quite remarkable to watch what's happened to Seattle and the region, quite frankly, over the last 25 years or so.
Okay, so let's jump into, I've drawn a graph here called the locked-in effects. I'll try to explain what I've did and you'll get your insight in here. But I wanted to start off, what do you encounter with the average person in Seattle? We're a highly educated city. Sort of misconceptions about how the economy works. We'll see people have a knee-jerk reaction to 1/10 of an interest point rate, or Amazon fired 400 people and people freak out.
Right.
And in my mind, even though I'm not a trained economist, I'm like, I think we're overreacting there. Am I right on that, my intuition?
Yeah, and you really are. And I think so many people actually will automatically in their head go back to 2008. And whether you're a broker or even whether you're a homeowner, a buyer or seller, you go, I mean, look what happened then. Complete evisceration of the market for almost 5 years. And so everyone kind of gets their mind back into a feast or famine mentality. If it's going up too quickly, it's got to come down as quickly. And the other thing when it comes to mortgage rates, quite frankly, is most people don't understand them. They don't know how they're created. So they think that when the Fed meets, and by the way, they met the last couple of days, they'll make an announcement right about now. They'll say they're keeping rates the same. But the point being is that people will look at that and say, well, that directs mortgage rates. It does not. But again, so there's a lot of people really haven't got much of an idea, which I think is remarkable, given the value of housing in America, ownership housing, about $50 trillion, give or take.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
So this data I have in here, feel free to correct anything that I'm wrong. I actually gave Matthew the button to correct me. So what I've done here, the black line, Matthew, is homes for sale in King County, all right? And it goes back to 2020, and it just tracks how many homes for sale over time. And so we see what we always talk about in the first of every year. You see this uptick in listings, but it's sort of been trending up. We're getting higher highs as we go along through the year over year. And so, for instance, in 2022, right in the middle of COVID, there's only 1,400 homes for sale in King County. And so you move that forward to the beginning of 2025 last year, and that's over double. So that's the first data point. Right. The second data point is this pink line, which is interest rates. And so these are averages. We know that some people got below 3 actually back in the day. But in 2019, we were up in the 4s. 2020, we're down in 3.37, went down to almost 3 flat, and then bam, it shot up to 7, and now we're a little bit below 7 is where, I think we're actually below 6.75 now. But
we're well below that.
Yeah, so
6.2 right now.
We're lower than 6.25. So those are the first data points. Right. So what I found was, so anything wrong with that so far?
I mean, no. I mean, the up and the down, classic, because they're buying seasons. So if you were to seasonally adjust those, it would smooth out that kind of weird, looks like your heartbeat curve. But basically that makes sense. Starting in 2020, I always like to go back further. The last, quote, normal year.
Okay. I'd
probably say 2019. In fact, we saw a run up from 2012 onwards, but at least it was not COVID induced, because that's what's important. And it's important because of that, the dotted line you show here, interest rates. So they were actually, relatively speaking, not bad, in the 3s. And then one thing the Fed did do that impacted real estate and impacted mortgage rates, which they generally don't do, as I said earlier, is they started buying bonds, mortgage bonds. They started buying treasury bills, 10-year treasuries, which is what you base mortgage rates on. At least the 30-year you do.
And that was in this period.
Right. So by buying it, I mean, forget 3.15, we got down to 2.67% on one day. Which is really quite stupid. It should never have happened. But because it did, there are consequences to your actions.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. Sure. Why should interest rates never be that low? And I remember Don and I talking ad nauseum back then of saying, these are historically low rates. This is not money is supposed to have a price to it.
And there is. Well, where is my wand?
Oh, here, you can have your wand.
No, it's all good.
It's a Harry Potter wand.
Harry Potter. How do you use that?
Yeah.
All right. So how can they not? Well, the way you calculate mortgage rates on a 30-year, you take the yield on 10-year treasuries, and then you add on a risk premium. Always going to be a risk of a mortgage over a bond of which there is supposedly zero risk. So you can say, well, hang on, 30-year mortgages, 10-year treasuries, explain. We move on average every 10 years. That's why they based it. And that was how they based it back in April 1971 when they first came out with the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. So if you think about it in those terms, for it to drop down and stay down lower than that, well, you need to have treasury yields to plummet. The only time that tends to happen is when we have a recession. Money comes out of equities into bonds, price of the bond goes up, yield, the interest rate goes down, and there you go. But because there were such active buyers with quantitative easing and these kinds of things, it pushed down rates below, really quite frankly, where they should be. I mean, I think the terminal long-term rate on a 10-year treasury is around 4%. Why? We have too much debt. Topic for a different day. But because we have that debt, 4% is about right. 4% plus a risk premium, generally speaking, just sub 2 is what it's been historically. That brings you up to about 6%.
This brings us to my last piece of data, and I'm going to steal my wand back.
Yeah.
See if I'm right on this. So this little inset box, because I couldn't figure out a way to overlay it here, shows the percentage of Americans with an interest rate over 6%, under 3%, and between 5 and 6%. So what we saw is there used to be in the 2015 area, over 30% of households had a 6% mortgage or higher.
Yep.
Then as these interest rates come down into the twos, all of these people refinance. So you virtually had no one with an interest rate under 3% for years and years and years. And then bam, all of a sudden it jumps to over 20%, probably might be higher in Seattle. When you overlay that onto this, what you have is all of these people that lowered their monthly payments significantly, and now they're locked into their house. Is that correct how that worked?
Yeah, this is
Give
very,
you the
very cool
wand back.
chart, by the way. So you are, again, trying to unpack that even further. One, COVID came along, we moved. Remote working, these kinds of things. But overlay onto that, the Fed reducing rates. Every time, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about it. If you own your house and you have a mortgage on it and your payment is whatever it is, if interest rates drop by 1%, you can borrow 10% more and your payment stays the same. So again, interest rates drop, your buying power increases. So we're gangbusters. Therefore, we saw transactions nationally and certainly locally went through the roof because everyone was either refinancing or they were buying, upgrading, these kinds of things.
And so when we overlay the fact that there were only 1,400 houses coming on the market in 2020 with an interest rate under 3%, that's why we saw incredible escalations in our market here.
Exactly. And the other part of that equation going forward, and this is the one thing I don't think the Fed got right. They wanted housing stability. They wanted us to move, because what do we do when we move homes? We buy big ticket items and American massive refrigerators and things. So that stimulates the economy. But what they didn't think about was what happens after that. I didn't move. I refinanced my home twice. I've got a 2% 20-year fixed rate mortgage, and you will pry that mortgage from my cold, dead fingers.
Right.
I ain't going nowhere.
Right.
So that really has artificially depressed supply. Go back to Econ 101, limit supply, have net new demand. What happens to prices? They go up.
Right.
And that's certainly what we
So
saw.
I'm going to rewind back to, you mentioned 2019 as a normal year.
Well,
explain a real estate market in the Puget Sound when it comes to balanced, normal, and seller's market, buyer's market,
Right.
because I don't know if people really understand that. Even now it feels like a buyer's market, but I don't know if we're technically a buyer's market even yet.
Yeah, and I don't think we are. I mean, you say normal, the last kind of normal-ish is the best way I can describe it. Because quite frankly, we haven't had nationally or even locally a normal housing market since probably early 1990s. But that was the formation of the housing bubble with President Clinton. Everyone deserves a house, blah, blah, blah. So it has really had been that way. So we kind of built that up. .com hit us and San Francisco harder than most other markets in 2000. We then big ramp up again specifically because my dog qualified for a mortgage.
Right.
Which got stupid. And then all came crashing down in 2008. Prices dropped from 2008 through 2011. Literally, it's a long period of time. Kept on coming down. It was a hiccup because of first-time buyer tax credits. Anyway, so then from 2012 up to 2022, whoa, through the roof again. So we really haven't seen it normal. But what this shows is that more inventory, yes, but people, certainly real estate brokers, they think, well, hang on, this is terrible, too much out there. I mean, taking too long to sell. Well, go back and compare it to 2019. Inventory levels are lower. I like looking actually at new listings rather than total inventory. I think it's a more accurate view of what's going on. And so we're still below that. Time on market has gone up. And so if you think about months of inventory, take the number of transactions divided into the, number of listings divided by sales. And that will give you how long it would take to sell every home. And that has risen, but it's still below where we were back during most of the last decade.
By the technical indicators, the Puget Sound, and not every single town in the Puget Sound, would technically still be a seller's market. Is that correct?
I'd say it is. And the reason why, I looked up some numbers this morning. I look at list pricing. Again, that I think is a forward indicator. Sell prices, I don't really care what happened. Somebody borrowed money, bought a house 3 months ago, so what? What are people asking? And they're asking more. Last year, median list price was up over 3%. So you've got home sellers still saying, ball's still in my court. However, home buyers, that's getting to be a bit of a problem because of one thing, affordability.
Right.
And that's really what is going to slow the market down eventually.
So this graph is supposed to say that there's an inflection point coming, and I'm curious if you agree.
Yep.
For the first time since 2020, we now have a higher percentage of people that are over 6 than are below 3. And so we see these two lines converge here. Is that going to unlock anything in your mind where people like you that have this ultra low interest rate and want to move will finally go, okay, I'm gonna finally do it. I've been wanting to move. This is too much house, or we need to downsize, or we need to upsize, whatever it is. Is that going to unlock it?
Well, those what you're referring to are so-called golden handcuffs. That you're tiny, you've got a whole bunch of money in your house, but I don't want to give it up, and therefore I have to stay here. Now, nationally, I did look this up, and you're right. 21.2% of homeowners have a rate above 6, and 20 flat have a rate below 3. But of course, here in Seattle, we're special, and it's not quite that way. Although there is no granularity down to the Seattle market. I get data at the state level. So Washington State, right now, we have above 6, 17%, nationally 20, below 3, 24.2.
Wow.
So still a lot more because we haven't moved as much as the Sunbelt states.
And break this down super simply. The reason why you won't move is because to get the same house, your monthly payment goes up by a lot, correct?
It would do. Obviously, it all depends on how much down payment you put down and how much equity you take out of the house you're selling. But if you're upsizing, yeah, it will do. If you're downsizing, it's a different thing. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's going to have to get exactly the rate that they currently have before they're going to move. Absolutely, no, don't need to. But it's got to get to within about 2 percentage points. And that will be more stimulative for home sellers to start saying, okay, yeah, you know what? I love this house, but I really want to move down. I mean, Yuma, Arizona is my place or whatever. And this rate is not going to hold me back. But if you're looking at double in terms of an interest rate, that's a hard push.
That's a hard one to see.
It really is.
So my final question for you, and I could talk to you for an hour. My final question is, when we see these headlines of Amazon lays off 1,500 people, Microsoft lays off 1,000 people, is that, how much should we pay attention? Is there not, in my mind, a natural opportunity for a big company like that to say, we're just going to chop off our 10% of our least performers, and our business is still fine. We're still hiring white-collar jobs, or am I misinterpreting that?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things to pass with that. And obviously, recently, there's been a lot of announcements made. In fact, yesterday or this morning, Expedia said they're laying off 10% of their workforce. We know that Amazon, 16,000 layoffs globally after 14,000, I think, last October. Yeah, that I think is a couple of things that's going on with that. One, companies are resizing based upon, to a degree, AI, but I think, quite frankly, many of them are using AI as an excuse. And why are they doing that? Well, I went back to COVID when we had massive layoffs. I mean, literally, it was remarkable. In the information sector, which is the area they come under, yeah, they dropped about 1,700 jobs for 2 months. Then they started back up again.
Right.
And so it was really kind of quite remarkable. So 1,700 dropped. They went from 126,000 up to 141,000 by the end of 2022.
So if it impacts you individually, it's a huge deal. But as an economy as robust as the Puget Sound, you would have to see significant layoffs here locally, not worldwide, but locally.
And honestly, you got to figure out, and obviously they're very bad at telling you how many people work where, and Amazon is really bad at that. So yes, it does. Now, also you got to think about it in a few other ways. If somebody is worried they might lose their job, are they going to go out and buy a home, which for 98% of the population is the most expensive thing they'll ever buy in their lives, or not? Or are they going to sell? So I think that people will just almost get paralysis based upon, I don't know what's going on. Point two, people that do lose their jobs, it's terrible. I totally get it. But most of them, guess what? They get another job.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're going to be down checking at Fred Meyer. I mean, they will. So to assume just because they're out from that company, they're sat around in their bunny slippers watching daytime TV. No, they don't do that. So I think that it's something, again, that we try and find what's the next worst thing to happen? And especially when it comes to housing, because we've got some whiplash over what we remember, either as an owner or even for some of these younger kids as a child back in '08, where maybe their parents lost their homes to foreclosure. So you're going to be a little bit worried about that.
So my final question with Matthew Gardner, economist. The Brits are famous for their optimism. What's the Gardner optimism scale for 2026 in real estate?
In real estate, when it comes to housing, I think it's going to be a transition year. I think prices will rise. I think we'll see probably transactions up 4 to 5%, not a massive jump, but trending the right way. But because it's an economist and it is the dismal science, as everyone knows, what worries me, and that tends to be the biggest thing, housing affordability, and not for you or I. We've done great on housing for our kids. I've got a kid that's graduating Gonzaga in May. He is not moving back in with me. So
go Zags!
Oh, hell yeah! I changed the locks. So I think what you need to look at is how do we add more housing stock? Because that's the problem we have in the Puget Sound. Too much water, too many mountains, mass transit, whatever you think about that. But we need to do it. And builders would be building if it made financial sense, but it's not. It's too expensive. But if we don't get them squared away, then it's going to be very, very tough to continue to grow, because then you're going to be limited to income growth and a few other things.
Yeah.
So that's what worries me, is affordability. Positive side, imminent crash. Sky falling in. I just don't see it. I think that this year for real estate brokers will be better in terms of transactions than last year. Last year for many was better than the year before, just about.
Right.
And this year will be better than last. So, yeah.
So I enjoy listening to you. That's why I invited you on the show. If other people have enjoyed listening to you, how can we follow you and anything that you want to invite our listeners to go check out?
Well, my YouTube channel, where I put out videos probably not as frequently as I should, which is, oh Lord, probably. I'll give you the links for all those. So that,
okay.
Because I'm really bad at that kind of
Of course.
I do it, but I just don't know where they are. But yeah, so between that,
but if someone searches Matthew Gardner,
you
economist,
search Matthew Gardner Seattle, I'm the first 10 pages.
So he'll show up, and so really appreciate you coming in.
I didn't get a chance to.
Hit the button. All right, he's economist Matthew Gardner. I'm Ron, and Don was at the intro. If you want to sit down with us, go to ronandonsitdown.com.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.